And just like that, we're back to square one with the recent news that Vasily Lomachenko will not be facing Gervonta Tank Davis later this year. If you haven't already heard, word is Loma, aka High Tech, is not on board for a fight with Tank, and according to Loma's manager, it is because Loma isn't in the mood and is lacking motivation to fight. Of course, many fans and spectators are hollering, "It's a duck," with no hesitation. Most are assuming that Lomachenko just ducked Tank Davis after it seemed that we were on the verge of receiving the fight. And because Lomachenko traveled to the US last week during negotiations for a bout with Tank, it's hard to disagree with the folks who believe the notion of him, Loma, ducking Davis. Because I'm sure the question most will be asking is, why did he negotiate a fight if he wasn't gonna follow through in the first place? You know, why not ask for a later fight date if he didn't want to start training until the end of this year? Which would be fair points to make since the fight was targeted for November of this year. The one thing boxing fans hate the most is getting our hopes up just to end up disappointed when the shit really matters. But at the same time though, I can see where Loma fans will make the argument that it was Tank who ducked Loma first, giving Lomachenko every right to do as he pleases. Another very strong point when you look at it from said fighter's perspective. Listen, I get it, and I can understand it on both ends. The thing is, I feel like there's something many, if not everyone, is overlooking here. Because whether you believe Lomachenko's days are numbered or not, the one thing we cannot ignore is the fact that Loma did recently propose the idea of him stepping aside so that Tank and Shakur could make a fight, with him, Loma, facing the winner sometime next year. I mean, it was Tank's co-trainer, Kenny Ellis, who was leaking this information to media outlets, and with this most recent statement from Lomachenko's manager, this may just be confirmation that Loma really isn't in the mood and indeed lacks the motivation to fight until next year. The problem with all that is, I don't see Tank vs. Shakur happening anytime soon, bruh. Like, I would bet the house that bout doesn't get made before I bet the house that Israel Madrimov will be a walk in the park for Terrence Crawford. That's how confident I am that Tank vs. Shakur doesn't get made this year. And if I'm wrong, I'll give my damn self donkey of the day. Shit, ain't no shame in my game because we all know it won't happen. It ain't gonna happen. That's just what it is. My only concern upon hearing this news, even before this recent post from Kenny Ellis' Instagram, was and is, what happens if Lomachenko gets comfortable while taking this quote-unquote break? You know, people forget that these athletes are human beings as well. These guys have families, some even have personal things that they deal with when they're not active. Now we must remember that Loma is 36 years old, and given his history of injuries, there's the slight possibility where we could see Vasily Lomachenko just fade into the background, bro. Especially when we hear things like not in the mood or lacking motivation. That could be a clear indication that maybe, just maybe, Loma doesn't have the same hunger he once had once upon a time. And it's very understandable, being that his mission was to be undisputed at 135. You know, that still hasn't happened for the guy, whether you believe he was robbed against Devin Haney or that the Teofimo fight wasn't really for undisputed. Whole point is, Loma has fell short in both attempts, and after a while, that kind of shit can catch up with you, man. It's almost equivalent to when fighters don't know how to hang it up. We've seen Hall of Famers like Roy Jones Jr., Oscar De La Hoya, and Sugar Shane Mosley who just couldn't accept when their glory days were behind them. For example, if I'm not mistaken, boxing legend Sergio Martinez is still currently fighting and actually racking up some victories while remaining active. My point is, sometimes the complete opposite happens where a guy keeps fighting just because he knows he can hang with the young guns. And since they've dedicated their lives to being professional boxers, they find themselves in a situation where because they still feel a lot left in the tank, no pun intended, they believe it's only right to keep going. Kinda like we see with JoJo Diaz. Shit, even Mayweather retired once or twice before he actually hung it up for good. And Floyd is on record saying how he lost his passion for boxing long before he actually called it quits. Then you have the fighters who don't officially retire, they just stay inactive until they're physically out of shape and legitimately out of their prime. For instance, no one knew Mikey Garcia retired. He just stopped fighting after his loss to Sandor Martin. Look at Danny Swift Garcia. Danny looks to be in tremendous shape. He still hints at a return to the ring, and although I believe he will try to campaign at 154, if you ask any casual fan out there about him, I bet the first thing they ask you is, that guy still fighting? So when it comes to Lomachenko and this recent news, I believe the suspicion should be raised and the questions must be asked. Did Lomachenko lose his hunger? Is it really that he just doesn't feel like fighting right now? Or is this an unannounced retirement that we won't be aware of until we finally never see him stepping foot into the ring again? Because based on the perception from the outside looking in, most people are going to agree that Lomachenko is indeed afraid of Gervonta Tank Davis. Like, it's hard to say that he didn't just duck the smoke. And if we see him fighting some Johnny-come-lately top of next year, Loma fans can just forget about it, bruh, to be honest. I, for one, would like to hope there's no ducking or retirements going on around here, because Lomachenko versus Tank is what's best for boxing. Lomachenko versus Shakur is what's best for boxing. And I'd be damned if we see Loma waiting for his hunger to come back 3 years from now, trying to face the Mario Barrioses of the world. No, I'm not jumping to conclusions, and I'm not assuming anything. All I'm saying is, it would be a damn shame to see Lomachenko get lost in the shuffle here. With that being said though, Vasyl Lomachenko at 36 is pretty old for boxing, but after his last performance, I don't think anyone believes that's too old for him. So hopefully this break has a lot more to do with him just trying to regather himself before facing the likes of Tank and Shakur, all the while spending some much needed time with his family and maybe even refocusing after fighting in that war, because that's also something that cannot be forgotten. Loma did rush back to the ring after fighting for his country of Ukraine, and there's still a lot going on over there at the moment. By the way, there have also been some reports out there that Gervonta Tank Davis was asking for a $40 million payday in order to make the fight with Loma, which to some very well could be playing a factor here, but Loma's manager did go out of his way to let it be known that Vasily Lomachenko isn't willing to make the fight happen, not even for, and I quote, tens of millions of dollars. Take that for what you will, but one thing's for sure, if it wasn't already clear before, then it's definitely clear now. Loma will not be Tank's next opponent. Sucks, but hey, what can you do? Pop off.